ever wondered who shook the foundations of faith? Did you know women have been causing divine drama for centuries? Number 11. Mary Magdalene. Was she a prostitute or Jesus' closest disciple? Mary Magdalene remains one of Christianity's most misunderstood women. For centuries, the Catholic Church portrayed her as a reformed prostitute, a narrative that stuck in popular imagination. Yet nowhere in the Bible is this actually stated. What we do know is that Jesus cast 7 demons out of her, she financially supported his ministry, and she was the first person to witness his resurrection. In 2016, Pope Francis elevated her feast day to the same level as the apostles, calling her the Apostle of the Apostles. But the controversy around Mary Magdalene goes deeper than her profession. The Gnostic Gospel of Philip, discovered in 1945, describes her as Jesus' companion, whom he used to kiss on her mouth. Some scholars even believe she was Jesus' wife or closest disciple, purposely sidelined by the early church to diminish women's role in Christianity. The Da Vinci Code popularized these theories, but they've existed for centuries. Was she erased from history by men who couldn't accept a female apostle? Or was she truly just one of many followers? Either way, Mary Magdalene represents how easily women's roles in religious history can be rewritten, obscured, or sexualized to fit prevailing narratives. Number 10. Hypatia of Alexandria. Can a pagan female philosopher become a martyr for scientific freedom? Hypatia was Alexandria's most brilliant mind in the 4th century. A mathematician, astronomer, and philosopher who taught both Christians and pagans. In 415 CE, amid rising tensions between Christians and pagans, she was dragged from her chariot by a Christian mob, stripped naked, beaten, and torn to pieces using oyster shells. Her remains were burned. Hypatia wrote commentaries on algebra, geometry, and astronomy. She invented the astrolabe for ship navigation and the hydrometer for measuring liquid density. As a Neoplatonist philosopher, in increasingly Christian Alexandria, she became a symbol of pagan learning that some Christians saw as threatening. The controversy around Hypatia continues today. Was she killed for being a pagan, for being a woman in a male domain, or simply caught in political crossfire between Alexandria's bishop and governor? Her violent death marked the end of Alexandria's status as an intellectual center. Some historians view her as the last light of ancient science, extinguished by religious zealotry. Others argue her death had more to do with city politics than religion. Regardless, Hypatia remains a powerful symbol of female intellectual achievement, destroyed by religious intolerance. Number 9. Joan of Arc. How did a teenage peasant girl convince an army to follow her? Joan of Arc heard voices, St. Michael, St. Catherine, and St. Margaret, she claimed, instructing her to drive the English out of France. In 1429, at just 17, this illiterate farmer's daughter somehow persuaded the French Dauphin to give her troops. She led the French to victory at Orleans, turning the tide of the 100 Years' War. Joan wore men's clothing, cut her hair short, and refused to marry. She referred to herself using the masculine side of her family name. Jean La Pucelle. After being captured by Burgundian allies of the English, she was tried for heresy and witchcraft. When asked if she knew she was in God's grace, she famously replied, "If I am not, may God put me there, and if I am, may God keep me there." A theologically sophisticated answer that surprised her judges. Condemned primarily for cross-dressing and claiming direct divine guidance, Joan was burned at stake in 1431. 25 years later, the Catholic Church nullified her trial, and in 1920, she was canonized as a saint. Joan remains controversial because she defied nearly every medieval expectation for women. Was she mentally ill, experiencing epileptic hallucinations as some modern doctors suggest? Was she a military genius, using religious visions as cover in a superstitious age? Or was she truly divinely inspired? The Maid of Orleans continues to captivate because she refuses easy categorization. Number 8. Akka Mahadevi. Would you abandon everything, including your clothes, for spiritual freedom? In 12th century India, Akka Mahadevi was a beautiful young woman forcibly married to a local king. Devoted to Lord Shiva, she rejected her husband's claims on her body, declaring, "I have given my mind, given my body, given my love to my lord white as jasmine. To another man I shall not give them." She left the palace, wandering naked through villages, with only her extremely long hair covering parts of her body. She wrote, "People, male and female, blush when a cloth covering their shame comes loose. When all the world is the eye of the Lord watching everywhere, how can you be modest, covering yourself in modesty?" This radical rejection of social conventions shocked medieval India. Mahadevi wrote over 350 Vakanas poems in Kannada language, rejecting caste, gender restrictions, and material possessions. She belonged to the Lingayat movement, which challenged Hindu orthodoxy and promoted equality. Her poetry openly discusses female desire and spiritual longing with stunning intimacy. She describes herself as married to Shiva. "My lord, white as jasmine, is my husband." When asked why she went naked, she reportedly answered that the soul comes naked into the world and leaves naked. Clothes only feed vanity. She died at just 30, yet centuries later her poems remain controversial for their radical stance on female spirituality and bodily autonomy. Was she mentally unstable, as some critics claimed? Or was she the ultimate feminist, rejecting every social constraint on women? For millions of Hindus, especially in Kangnam, she remains a venerated saint who achieved union with the divine. Number 7. Hildegard von Bingen. How did a sickly nun become one of the Middle Ages' most powerful voices? Hildegard experienced visions since childhood. Born in 1098 to German nobility, she was given to the church at age 8. By her 40s, she could no longer contain the divine command to share her visions. She wrote to Bernard of Clairvaux, who brought her writings to Pope Eugenius III. The Pope declared her a prophetess, giving extraordinary authority to a medieval woman. Hildegard wasn't just a mystic. She composed music that still sounds avant-garde today. She wrote medical texts describing the female orgasm and suggesting sexual pleasure was crucial to conception. She invented her own language called lingua ignota. She corresponded with kings, emperors, and popes, telling them to reform their ways. She went on preaching tours at a time when women weren't allowed to preach. When she died in 1179, there were attempts to canonize her immediately, but the process stalled for centuries until 2012, when Pope Benedict XVI finally declared her a saint and doctor of the Church. What makes Hildegard controversial is how she navigated extreme gender restrictions. She claimed her authority came directly from God, bypassing male church hierarchy. She described her feminine weakness as proof God was working through her. Yet she used her platform to criticize corrupt clergy and promote women's health knowledge that was later suppressed. Was she a feminist centuries ahead of her time, or a clever woman using the system's loopholes to gain power? Perhaps both. Number 6. Mother Teresa. Can a saint be criticized? Mother Teresa was awarded the Nobel Peace Prize in 1979 for her work with Kolkata's poorest. After her death in 1997, she was fast-tracked to sainthood, canonized by Pope Francis in 2016. Yet, no modern religious figure has faced such dramatically opposing assessments. Christopher Hitchens famously called her a fanatic, a fundamentalist, and a fraud. Medical professionals who visited her missionaries of charity homes described inadequate medical care, reuse of needles without sterilization, and patients denied pain relief due to Mother Teresa's belief that suffering brought one closer to Christ. Critics pointed to the hundreds of millions of dollars her order received, while patients remained in Spartan conditions. Others questioned why she accepted money from dictators like Haiti's Jean-Claude Duvalier. Most controversially, a 2013 study by Canadian academics examined nearly 300 documents about Mother Teresa's life and work, concluding there was a gap between image and reality regarding the quality of care in her missions. The study suggested media created an unassailable myth around her. Yet, her defenders note she never claimed to run hospitals, but hospices for the dying who had nowhere else to go. They argue criticisms come from Western perspectives, disconnected from Indian realities. Mother Teresa herself said, "The poor give us much more than we give them. They're strong in their faith. We have material things, but they have God." Was she a selfless saint or a religious fanatic who glorified suffering while hoarding donations? The controversy around Mother Teresa reflects larger tensions about charity, colonialism, and how we help the poor. Number 5. Aisha bint Abu Bakr. How young is too young for marriage? Aisha was the Prophet Muhammad's favorite wife and one of Islam's most important early scholars, transmitting over 2,000 hadiths, sayings, and actions of Muhammad's. She was known for her intelligence, photographic memory, and political influence after Muhammad's death. Yet today, she's at the center of one of Islam's most sensitive controversies. According to traditional Sunni sources, Aisha was betrothed at 6 or 7, and the marriage was consummated when she was 9 or 10, after she reached puberty. Modern scholars debate these accounts, with some calculating she was actually 19 based on historical events and her sister's age. Others argue child marriage was common in ancient cultures, with puberty marking adulthood, making it inappropriate to apply modern standards. Beyond age debates, Aisha was politically controversial in her own time. After Muhammad's death, she participated in the Battle of the Camel against Ali ibn Abi Talib, the Prophet's son-in-law, revered by Shias. This battle deepened the Sunni-Shia split that continues today. Shia scholars often view Aisha critically, while Sunni traditions venerate her as Mother of the Believers. Aisha lived 40 years after Muhammad's death, becoming an important jurist who challenged male companions' interpretations of the Prophet's teachings. She corrected misconceptions, saying, "How would the Prophet do something that he himself had forbidden?" Feminist Islamic scholars point to her confidence in theological disputes as evidence of women's rightful place in Islamic intellectual tradition. Was she a child bride, victimized by a patriarchal system, or a powerful woman who helped shape a world religion? The answer largely depends on who's telling her story. Number 4. Aimee Semple McPherson. Can a female evangelist be glamorous, powerful, and holy? In 1920s America, Aimee Semple McPherson was a superstar who combined Hollywood showmanship with Pentecostal fervor. She founded the Four Square Gospel Church, which now has millions of members worldwide. Sister Amy drew crowds of 30,000, healed the sick, and performed elaborate, illustrated sermons with costumes and stage effects that would make Broadway jealous. She pioneered radio evangelism, broadcasting sermons daily on her own station, KFSG. She once drove an ambulance across the country, preaching in every city she passed through. In 1926, she built Angelus Temple in Los Angeles, seating 5,300 people at a time when few women could even get a bank loan. Then came the scandal that nearly destroyed her. In May 1926, McPherson disappeared while swimming at Venice Beach. Her followers held vigils, believing she had drowned. 35 days later, she stumbled out of the Mexican desert, claiming she had been kidnapped. But a coastal engineer in Carmel recognized her as a woman who had been staying in a cottage with a former radio station employee. The ensuing kidnapping trial became a media sensation, with some believing she had fabricated the kidnapping to cover an affair or secret abortion. McPherson's ministry survived the scandal, and during the Great Depression, Angelus Temple fed up to 1.5 million people. She opposed evolution, championed women's right to preach, and used the media more effectively than any religious leader before her. Was she a charlatan, exploiting the desperate, or a genuine believer who brought healing to millions? Either way, she forever changed how religion uses mass media and challenged fundamental assumptions about women's roles in Christianity. Number 3. Brigid of Kildare. Can a pagan goddess become a Christian saint? Brigid straddles the boundary between Celtic mythology and Christian hagiography like no other figure. One of Ireland's patron saints alongside Patrick, her feast day on February 1st, coincides exactly with Imbolc, the pagan festival of the goddess Brigid. According to Christian accounts, Brigid was born around 451 CE to a Christian slave mother and pagan chieftain father. She founded the monastery of Kildare, a double monastery where both men and women lived, though in separate quarters. Unikly for medieval Europe, this monastery was led by a line of abbesses, not abbots. Her miracles typically involved multiplication of food, healing, and control over the weather. What makes Brigid controversial is how thoroughly her story incorporates pagan elements. Her monastery was built beside an ancient oak, sacred to Druids. Kildare means Church of the Oak. The eternal flame kept burning by her nuns until the Reformation echoes the sacred flames kept for the goddess Brigid. Even her stories mirror the goddess's attributes as patron of poetry, smithcraft, and healing. Some scholars argue Saint Brigid never existed as an individual, but represents the Christianization of goddess worship. Others suggest she was a historical abbess, whose life became entwined with goddess traditions to ease Ireland's conversion. The Catholic Church seemingly acknowledged these questions by removing her from the universal calendar in the 1969 reform, though she remains important in Ireland. In recent years, feminist theologians have reclaimed Brigid as representing a more feminine nature connected Christianity that was suppressed by the medieval church. Whatever the truth, Brigid reminds us that religious boundaries are often more porous than official accounts suggest. Did the goddess become a saint, or did the saint absorb the goddess's power? In Ireland, where Christian and pagan traditions have long intertwined, perhaps the distinction never mattered. Number 2. Rabba al-Basri. Can a woman love God too much? Born into poverty in 717 CE in Basra, modern Iraq, Rabia was sold into slavery after her parents died. After her master witnessed her surrounded by light while praying, he freed her in awe. She became an ascetic, rejecting marriage proposals from prominent suitors, including the ruler of Basra. Rabia revolutionized Sufism by introducing the concept of divine love. Unlike earlier Sufis, who worshipped God from fear of hell or desire for paradise, she declared, "O God, if I worship you for fear of hell, burn me in hell. And if I worship you in hope of paradise, exclude me from paradising. But if I worship you for your own sake, grudge me not your everlasting beauty." She taught that true devotion meant wanting nothing from God except God Himself. Her independence shocked medieval Islamic society. When asked why she wasn't married, she allegedly replied, "I am absorbed in the grief for the beloved. The marriage knot can only be tied by one who exists, but as I have ceased to exist and have been annihilated from self, I am not here, under the shadow of the Lord. I am not but His." What made Rabia controversial was her insistence on spiritual equality with men and her rejection of traditional roles. She refused to define herself through relationships with men, focusing solely on her relationship with God. Some male Sufis considered her spiritually superior to themselves, a radical position in 8th century Islamic society. Was she the first feminist theologian in Islam, or simply a mystic whose gender became irrelevant through devotion? For modern Muslim feminists, she represents a woman who carved her own spiritual path despite overwhelming patriarchal restrictions. Number 1. Eve was one woman responsible for humanity's fall. No female religious figure has been more influential or more vilified than Eve, whose story in Genesis shapes attitudes toward women in Judaism, Christianity, and Islam. The Eden narrative describes how Eve was deceived by the serpent, ate the forbidden fruit, and gave it to Adam, resulting in their expulsion from paradise. Throughout history, religious authorities used Eve's disobedience to justify women's subordination. Tertullian, an early church father, told women, "You are the devil's gateway. You destroyed so easily God's image, man." St. John Chrysostom claimed women were created stronger than men against irrational desires, specifically because Eve showed such weakness. The blame extended beyond religious contexts. When women were denied education or voting rights, Eve was often cited as justification. Yet, feminist theologians note several overlooked aspects of Eve's story. She's the only human in Eden to engage with theological questions, debating the serpent while Adam remains silent. The Hebrew word, traditionally translated as Adam's helper, Ezer, is used elsewhere in the Bible to describe God, hardly a subordinate role. Some Jewish interpretations see the eating of the fruit as humanity's necessary step toward moral autonomy and knowledge. The Gnostic Gospel of Eve, now lost except for fragments, apparently presented Eve as bringing wisdom rather than sin. Meanwhile, Islamic tradition often portrays Adam and Eve as equally responsible, both repenting and receiving forgiveness. The Quran never mentions Eve specifically in connection with temptation. Eve remains controversial because she stands at the intersection of fundamental questions about gender, sexuality, autonomy, and divine will. Was she humanity's downfall, or the mother of true consciousness? A cautionary tale about female weakness, or a hero who chose knowledge over ignorant obedience? The answer depends not just on which religion is interpreting her story, but on which voices within that religion have the power to shape its narratives. After thousands of years, we're still arguing about what really happened in that garden. What does that say about us? Did these women change religion, or did religion change them? Are controversial religious women remembered for their actual beliefs, or for how they challenged the men around them?